Hello, everybody. Welcome. We'll get started in just a minute here. Hey, Richard. Okay, people are starting to come in. It's recorded, so that's the good news. Even if we start now, Richard, we can get people caught up after. Okay, we'll wait another minute. Okay, fantastic. So we have people trickling in. Thank you guys so much for being here. It's great to have the L1O community back together again. It's been a little break between our educational webinars, but we're back at it with a special guest. So Richard, welcome. I'm going to give you a formal welcome, and we're so grateful for the topic today, which is media relations and content creation, specific to League One, our level, in our resources, which is really important that it's practical. So I'm just gonna read Richard's bio because it is quite extensive and amazing, and he deserves every bit of it. So Richard Scott is the Director of Communications for Canada Soccer, and he has been the lead storyteller with Canada Soccer's national teams and national competitions since 2006. He has worked extensively across international football, including CONCACAF tournaments, many of which I have been at with Richard, FIFA World Cups, and London 2012. He was also the Director of Communications for the record-breaking FIFA World Cup, the home World Cup here in Canada in 2015. There's another piece of this that is important to understand, is that he's covered about 1,000 games and over the course of his career, national teams and club competitions. And during his time with Canada Soccer, and he was able to sort of always be in touch from remotely, whether he was on site or from a distance, making sure that his team was operating. So Richard, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Carm. Thank you, everyone. Great to be here. And I guess we'll start with just taking over to the screen.
Yes, and while you do that, Richard, as you're setting up, just a reminder for everybody, if you keep your cameras off and your mics off, that would be perfect. You can turn them on at the end when we have a Q&A period. We're aiming for a 35-minute presentation and a 10-minute Q&A. As always, you can always type your questions in the chat box, either privately to me or publicly, and I will continue to monitor those. So without further ado, Richard, we're over to you.
Good. And I think you guys have my screen now.
We sure do. Yep, can see it
and
perfectly.
Good stuff.
Yes.
Of course, well, just as part of the welcomes too, of course, we are working with technology, and apologies if I am in an area where the Wi-Fi isn't always perfect. So if it does go down, I always have a backup plan in place in terms of needing to log in from my phone, and Carm, of course, will have this presentation. We kind of joked in terms of, in terms of timing today, in terms of looking to put this together 35, 40 minutes. So I can promise to have you guys off by 2:45 if you'd like to go and watch Alphonso Davies in German Cup competition this afternoon at 2:45. So always kind of thinking about that too at the same time. Just from our welcome, thank you again, Carm. Yes, talk a little bit about media relations, more so though about content creation, and with clubs and League One in mind. And just I've had the pleasure, I guess, just over the last couple of days to watch the first series of webinars that the League One put on. So fantastic work. Of course, as Joey Lombardi reminded us, I know not everybody's attention spans usually more than 15 minutes, but we're going to try to put things to a maximum of 3 topics today. So one is kind of just the opportunity, 2 are the assets that you may have, what's available, and 3, just a couple ideas when it comes to content from a team-based piece. Of course, the other thing too that we've learned from the first sessions of webinars, as Ollie reminded us, your brain might only remember about 50% of this, and your brain's going to fill in the other 50%. So no, 100%. If there's anybody that wants to reach out afterwards, anytime, I'll make sure that you guys have my contact phone number. Always available, always happy to chat, always excited to kind of learn in terms of what you guys might be doing at a club level, what you guys might be doing from a volunteer level, what you guys might be doing from a small group level. I know today the group might be a little diverse in terms of who's on the call. I've already seen a couple of comms names come on, which is great. So I am going to keep it pretty high level today, but in terms of there'll be opportunities to jump in with questions. And again, afterwards, if there's anything that you guys want to, kind of connect with me offline, again, the line is always open. And so, yes, in terms of introductions, just in terms of, as Carl mentioned, I've had the chance to work on, 20 or so CONCACAF tournaments and a number of FIFA tournaments, as well as the London 2012 games, as you can see with this photo, and Carm there in the front row. And this was just one of those photos, a little bit of the calm before the storm.
Here's Richard.
Yeah,
thanks so much. Thanks for this picture. I really appreciate it.
It is one of my favorite photos for the last 15 years. And every single time Canada has played, I'm on, whether it's, 3-4 in the morning in China, or whether it's, live in the stadium. One of the tricks that we've had, and of course, where we are today with video of almost every match compared to maybe, 15 years ago, where you're trying to cover a match where there is no coverage. Twitter didn't exist. There isn't going to be anything YouTube, so you have to kind of jump on a call with the coach or the manager afterwards and get the best story that you can, or routes through some sort of translation service to kind of help you. So again, it's I've always kind of loved the opportunity in terms of covering our games, and I've had a vast kind of swing in terms of what level of coverage or what type of how I've been able to follow a game has always been a little different as we go through. So if we dive in with and kind of the first category was just to talk a little bit, I think, about the opportunity. And one of the things that I've done kind of from watching the first season of Sessions, I've pulled a quote from previous presenters and kind of used them at the start of each of these categories. So there was a great thing that was said. One of them was just, we're here, you're helping men and women live their dreams. And no matter what level in sport, I think this is one of the great opportunities when it comes to storytelling. And it's something that you get to think of, whether you're in the role as helping with the media production, or whether you're in the role as a head coach or a player or team staff. I think one of the key things that when we look at, hopefully that you come out of this presentation today, is just the importance of teamwork and working across, not only the teammates, the other staff that you have within your own organization, but across the league as a whole. I think there's a great opportunity there where you guys can work together. And Team X might not have a big staff, but by the time you put Team X together with 19 other clubs, all of a sudden, the power of what you guys can do and what you guys can produce, I think has a chance to resonate. So, again, just a nice little quote, hopefully to start things off. And as we kind of, I think coming out of what Joey said, I think should hopefully resonate with a lot of people. And that was just the idea of a team culture. And again, in terms of, whether it's the team's vision, the alignment, the passion, and it comes back to, when you're working both in the media relations role as well as the content creation role, come back to the who, what, when, why, where, and what are the priorities for your organization. And I think you need to start there in terms of, one, having that understanding, but then also being able always to come back to what's important. Is it the brand? Is it ticketing? Is it your community? And so I think there's a great, chance there to kind of always, the work that you guys do have, resonate or kind of build off that key message, build off that vision, build off that priority for the organization. The other key thing to always keep in mind, that when it does come to storytelling, the comms role, is that very much you're part of a marketing team, and in a lot of cases too, with clubs, one person might be handling both the communications and the marketing and 4 or 5 or 6 other things. So 100% kind of recognize that, everybody will have a kind of different reality. But all the way up, where I started maybe 10 years ago, and we were 1.5 people, to where we are now with a group of 8. My role, I'm part of a marketing team. And one of our priorities will always come back to ticketing and brand. And of course, our vision is leading Canada to victory and making sure that Canadians have a lifelong passion for the sport. But again, so that understanding in terms of both comms and marketing, but the comms is such a great piece of the marketing tool in terms of being able to use your own channels to tell your own story, and to really amplify, the messages and the brand and the vision that you guys have within your control, with the way that you want to. So you're not just relying necessarily on other people to kind of tell your story. There are so many great tools which have kind of come in the last 10 years, which will allow you to tell the story the way that you want to. And trust me, I wish we had some of these tools 10, 15 years ago. Again, what's available now that you can do even off your phone. I don't want to say in terms of how long ago was it that, all your phone did was barely make a phone call. So, again, we'll come back to that in the next section, but I think it's also important that when you're looking at the assets, a lot of those assets these days are assets that the coach is going to want to use, that you're going to want to use, that, marketing part. So there's a lot of teamwork, and there's a lot of pieces there that can kind of be used across the 4 corners of your organization. My one slide, I guess, to make sure we did touch a little on media relations, just in terms of, I think, obviously timing is big, but flexibility is always big too. So one, I think, just a couple notes there in terms of understanding the dynamic that you guys will have. There's no question that, there's a league communications angle, but there's also team communications angle. And hopefully an idea that you guys are a group that can kind of work together, and offer support to each other, but also be able to kind of amplify what you guys are doing. And then the other piece, in terms of where, hopefully you guys are striving in terms of, getting into a Canadian championship, just to give you guys a couple of examples of where we have worked with the League One teams through the Canadian Championship. Typically, we need to, you'll have a media officer. Sometimes, again, it's a dual role, but it's somebody that's, helps us produce content, promote the team vision and key message, and serves as a liaison between the team and the local media. And the other piece, just in terms of recruitment, and I've seen it, again, before, along with working with in soccer. I used to work in hockey. I've had hands-on with, small organizations too, from a volunteer standpoint. And it's so important in terms of, one, being able to engage and recruit local volunteers, local staff that can help you create great content, that can help tell the story of your team. But I think, even some of the things that Joey was saying when it comes to coaching, I mean, there are some great opportunities there in terms of what you guys can deliver. But also the great opportunities for young writers, young journalists, young, sport enthusiasts that want to get, a leg in, want to have that opportunity to kind of really test themselves. Again, words that Joey's using, commitment, creativity, confidence, cooperation. Those are all things that, that you guys can offer as an organization. So it's not just that, that you have something that, you need filled, but there is also an opportunity that you guys have when it comes to recruiting, a chance for young people to kind of come in and have a chance in terms of helping you. We've seen it in terms of match day digital support. We can always suggest that, when you have that game, whether it comes to photos, videos, social media channels, it can be as much as, having a part-time person that helps with you. And again, I think, again, both the opportunity in terms of what you guys can provide, but also what they can then help support and kind of push what you guys want to do. I think there is a great opportunity there when it comes to, filling some of the spots. Talking with Carm, I know all the teams are a little different in terms of the size and scope. I've had a small chance to look over in the last week in terms of some of the things you guys have done on some of your channels. And I like a lot of it. Obviously there's no football right now, but some of you've still been creative in terms of some of the pieces that you guys are producing. But don't ever lose sight in terms of, those are opportunities also that you can maybe provide to somebody, where it's, if you've got, a staff person that, they can get somebody to help them on game days or certain times, or if you don't have a staff person, to be able to kind of, find somebody in your community that is, interested in working with you guys. So, I know we've talked a little bit about culture, and I'm going to come back to that in the third segment too, just in terms of, but what I wanted to do next was really look at some of the assets that you guys may already have in your arsenal, but also some of the assets that you guys can look to kind of share and put together, not just within your club, but also, again, across all the teams in League One. This was Carm's quote from one of the sessions. What do you have and what can you do? And don't lose sight of that. Sure, you may not be as big as, we're talking about Bayern as an organization as Bayern Munich, with offices in multiple countries, but you do have something special within your own community. You do have something in that you guys can, that you guys can use in terms of creating some great content and telling some great stories. There's no question about that. Again, I just mentioned, here's just an example in terms of, one of the keep up challenges that one of the clubs did, which I thought was fantastic. So I think, always just kind of keeping an eye in terms of what you guys have and what you can do. Balance and creativity, I think are always very big in terms of when you start to look across the channels that you do have, putting together some schedules, but balancing things out throughout the year, but also being creative. And again, whether it's one person that can kind of, throw ideas off, the other clubs, I think there's a great opportunity there too. One of the, as we get into the assets that you guys have, and this is an old slide that I put together and I wanted to bring it back. When I started at Canada Soccer, when I kind of explained storytelling, the main thing I wanted to kind of underline was that for me to tell, this much, I want to be able to know this much. And for me to know, this much, I need to have a library which has, a greater source of information. And so one of the things that we did with Canada Soccer was build that library, build that data library, that photo library, slowly starting to build a photo library so that when it comes time to any storytellers, they can pick out the pieces that they want. There's a great slide that Carm showed when it comes to data, info, knowledge, insight, and wisdom. I love that piece because, again, there is so much data out there now, and it's a matter of picking the right ones, finding the right balance, and being creative in terms of what you guys want to put together. So, again, through the next couple slides, just to kind of go through in terms of, again, the storyteller library in terms of ideas, assets, what access do you have, both to players. Obviously, right now, your access point is very different than when we're not in a COVID world, and schedules in terms of, kind of creating schedules in terms of when and how you guys, want to kind of tell your story perhaps across the year. Again, I'm a big believer in not just data, but also collecting, stories and notes. Data is very important, facts and figures, photos. I do know that, the league's got a library there that, again, not all 19 of you guys are chasing different photographers, but you guys can work collectively together. And videos and audio is big, and both rights, stuff that you guys own, and as well as non-rights stuff that you guys can share. So kind of just to glide through a few pieces, I think the presentation too that you guys had when it came to your data library and what's available to you guys, I think it's fantastic. There's such a great opportunity in terms of data which is in there. Having your fingertips to find any type of goal or any type of X, Y, Z on any player or any series of players or a team that you might want to talk about. I think it's important that whoever's in charge of creating content, as well as working with media, has a good grasp, kind of learns what those tools are, and see, where you guys can use them. But, trust me, that stuff didn't exist, even 5 years ago, in terms of some of the stuff which is now being made available. And even what you guys have now, I think it's very good, and it's excellent. I think the key thing is knowing where to find those pieces and knowing how to reshare them. The other important thing too is that I know a lot of leagues these days will work with a third party to kind of maintain or kind of track stats and everything like that. I think it's still very important from an organization as well as a club that you still have your own copies of the data, which is important. I've also, had I've had to work with a couple of organizations that have lost data when they've changed third parties to recover, kind of a league history. Again, it's amazing because, of course, we think in today's world everything is digital, but then we don't print it off and we don't back it up and we forget about it. So, again, it's not to say that all 19 clubs are writing out, their own stats or anything like that. You've got one central place for that. That's great. But still, to have an understanding of your own club histories, don't rely on somebody else. Still make sure that you are kind of taking those pieces. Again, League One Ontario data tools, there's some great pieces up there now in terms of league and team stats and leaders, player statistics and timelines, where I can go into one individual player and kind of see match by match what they've done. And then also keep an eye out and, what are the other resources that are going to help you, whether it's university sites, whether it's the other league sites like the CPL. Transfer Market, if you're not familiar with it, is the best site, I think, when it comes to club football information at a professional level. So, for instance, if you've got an alumni like a Kyle Larin who's gone through League One, is now playing at a professional level, if you want to, kind of track what they're doing at a club level, that's where you'll find all his game-by-game notes. And of course, Canada Soccer, our emphasis started first and foremost making sure that we had all our national team records in order. But we also have all our Canadian competition stats going back 100 years too. And we're always constantly filling that out. So we've got some great resources, both online as well as offline, that we're always happy to help with at the same time. So data is one piece. And then the next level on top of data will be your photos. And of course, those are so important when it comes to sharing and telling stories of events, of moments, of leagues. And I think there's two minimum things that you guys want to kind of make sure that you have at your disposal when it kind of comes to storytelling on a year-by-year basis. One is just having some great stock images, and whether it's some league and team marks as simple as the crest, a jersey. Martin's taken great photos if when your celebrations, your championship match, even the little League One banner or the medals and stuff like that. Those are kind of all positive and marks and kind of stock images that you can kind of use when you're telling your story. And you might not have a specific photo to that topic, but then you can land back or fall back on some of those stock images. And then the other thing too, when it comes to not just the other type of stock image that kind of falls in the next one is player and staff images. And I think it's important just to remember, it's people, right? So, a lot of, you get photography and you get all these action shots and it's like, hey, where's the photo of the coach? A couple of staples that I always kind of suggest is, one, making sure once a year you get a team photo, getting some group photos, some different combinations, and starting 11s. You may or may not have a chance to take individual headshots or action shots to a very single player. But when we run our Canadian Championship, just making sure that we get the starting 11 photo from every single team, from every single game, it ensures that I have at least a photo of 22 players at the start of every game. And if I need to come back, at least I've got some content, some photo content that I can use at some point with the story. So, again, it seems like an old tradition, but there actually still is a lot of value when it comes to those starting 11 photos. Headshots, action photos. Again, if you've got league photographer, that then again it's going to be shared across. And key moments, and key moments, it can be goals. Key moments can be the signing of an athlete. Key moment can be you take part in a community event or a special opening of field or anything like that, make sure important things that you guys do as an organization, make sure that the priorities of your organization, that you capture it. Story is one piece, photos the other piece. And of course, the new world, and again, when we talk about what we can do with phones, is also video is the other piece. And this is a big piece. I wish we had the technology when it came to recording video 15 years ago compared to what we have now. And there's two things that you guys can keep in mind. One are the video tools, the stuff that you guys own. But then there's other things that you may not have the rights to, but you can still share. And that's the great thing when it comes to a lot of the digital channels. And when you turn into social media, it's just that community of sharing things. So, the league and the teams, the videos, those are great. Again, I always come back to goals. And when you have that presentation in terms of a lot of that stuff's at your fingertips, and that could be in terms of some of the stat tools, that's fantastic. But if you've got a chance to really, again, I think when it comes to a game, sometimes we get lost into 15 events in a game, and we kind of tell the story evenly across, this happened and this happened and this happened. Really, the most exciting thing in our sport is a goal. And so if there's one goal or two goal or three goals, I mean, you should be spending, 80% of your story on those goals. And the tools, whether you capture it on photo, whether you capture it with video, or whether you're, describing as best as you can, again, goals are such a big part, of the passion of why we love this sport. And again, when it comes back to video sharing, again, I thought it was fantastic how some of the clubs last year were supporting their local CPL team, or wishing them luck when it comes to, them entering into the CPL final. And the same thing when it comes to our national team playing. The great chance to just, you can retweet or quote tweet, or reshare it on your Facebook or on your own channel. So again, it's not content that you've created, but you are resharing, re-amplifying content. So, again, 245 plus, Alfonso scores a goal. The way that we can create content on that or reshare that, we will share Bayern's post, or we can reshare, One Soccer's video assets that they have, because they have the rights to the German Cup competition. So again, always kind of keep in mind in terms of both what you guys have in your own arsenal, but also what else is out there that is in line with your priorities, in line with your brand, in line with your vision, that you can also share. And so, again, keeping that content building and creating. So even, again, I guess extending your reach in many ways. Again, I think it's pretty exciting in terms of where the world is moving in terms of mass data and what you can have at your fingertips. And it's fantastic. But again, I think that there's one thing that to come back on is how do you guys share that across your team? And again, I think, just the teamwork within your own team. We have examples when we're on the road, our videographer captures some great video, and that's stuff that our, team coaches and our team managers are going to want to use when it comes to presentations. It's stuff that our players want to use on their channels too. Same with photography, there's that piece, just because you're in your little bubble using it, just always remember too that kind of the rest of your organization is going to have that kind of need. And then as you work across an entire league, again, ideas that you might have, content you might have, might be great for you, but it might also be shareable across the road. So when you have a league photographer that's taking photos, they can then share it across the different clubs. And I think that's a great use of the strength that you guys have as a league and as a collective of teams. So to pull into kind of our third segment here now, and apology, the full quote was, focusing on personal joy. And I've pulled it here just back to just focus on joy. And again, as you can see with this image, and if you could, again, the video of the Championship FC London team are just a great examples of that's such a great story when it comes to our sport. is just the passion. It's just the celebration. And you know, the happiness of playing the sport. And it's such a big piece. And I think as we kind of build off what Joey Lombardi was talking when it comes to a team culture, again, you know, that alignment, the vision and the passion, you know, are pieces I think that you can kind of look at. And I think, you know, what I wanted to do here was just kind of provide a couple of examples, some things that you may be doing already, or some things that, you know, kind of have seen, or maybe you can take to another level when it comes to your clubs. One piece for sure is recognition program, and ensuring that you've got both a good recognition program as a league as well as individual clubs. And I think they give you an opportunity to kind of really reinforce not just the successes that you have, not just the successes that you have as the individual players are having, but also really to kind of to divest, I guess, into the values that you guys have as an organization. And it does help tell that story as you kind of build. So, you know, again, celebrating team culture, celebrating successes is important. Some notable examples, of course, are league honors, awards, all-stars. You guys have done that since day one. That's great. Team honors, I think, are important, and sometimes they get overlooked. And sometimes, too, and maybe less so in our sport, there are some other sports that they're so stat heavy. And I, you know, trust me, I've been in a you know, when you're working in hockey and you're writing about, you know, 900 different players, and somebody, you know, wants to send you a paragraph or a sentence to read and says, well, this defenseman scored, you know, 2 goals last year. There's better ways to kind of tell the stories about these athletes. There's more than just the stats. There's more than just the data when it comes to these athletes. And I think that sometimes, you know, a team honor program, you know, can provide some of that stuff. Milestones I think are important also. And so that's why I think it's important, you know, in terms of tracking and keeping your own team histories, not just relying on the stuff the league has, but having a good understanding in terms of when some of these milestones might be coming up or happen. And then also very big too with League One is the success of your alumni. Because, you know, of course, in terms of, you know, the league, in terms of in many leagues in Canada, in terms as we, you know, bring players in and move them up along the way, you know, sharing those stories and telling those stories of some of the successes that you've had. Coming back to kind of team honors and some great examples that I've seen, you know, whether it's a team MVP, some clubs have had a player's player award. I think anytime that you can also, you know, the untangible, you know, pieces too. Yeah, sure, you can look on a piece of paper, this guy led the team in goals, but you know, anything that kind of comes out of locker room in terms of what the players might have voted, or, you know, something like a most inspirational player has been, you know, great example, unsung hero. You know, several hockey teams have that. The Whitecaps have that, and they named it actually after a former, you know, staff member. Most improved player. And again, you know, when you come back to the values of the club, you know, community hero award, I think, is another great example. So again, I think there isn't necessarily a right answer of doing lots or doing many. It isn't, you know, may or may not be, you know, tied to an event gal that you have in terms of if you're a bigger organization with many clubs, or whether it's, you know, just a small kind of piece or with a digital piece. You know, kind of recognizing some of those pieces on a year-by-year basis, you know, will really kind of help you build your story, build your brand, build your vision as you kind of move through. So I think, you know, again, these are just a few examples. There's lots, you might have others, but I think the most important thing is just to ask yourself, you know, again, what are your priorities? What's your key messages? And, you know, how does this kind of reinforce, you know, what you guys want to achieve as an organization? And this is, again, you know, to come back to the organization, and it's more than just the game. You know, again, with this slide, I just showed a great example in terms of what Vaughn did when it came to, you know, one local, you know, national initiative with the Bell Let's Talk Day. I think, you know, again, hopefully inside, you know, kind of what you guys want to achieve as a club is, you know, be a part of your community and be good citizens, and not lose sight of those stories when it comes to, you know, more than just the games, but also great things that some of these people are doing, in the communities. And that also, applies to, it's not just, hey, player X has, gone on to the CPL and then, Champions League and X, Y, Z and scored at this many goals and everything like that. You are going to have great individuals that will do great things in your communities beyond sport. So to remember that, when it comes back to people in terms of, this might be a small portion in terms of their life, in terms of, you might have them from 15 to 21 or something like that, even a longer period. But a lot of these people that are going to come through your organizations are going to do great things, afterwards too. And so I think it's important when it comes to local and national causes. I think it's important in terms of supporting your community when it comes to the other teams and the other organizations. We kind of, have a good little wink, laugh or whatever not, but, the MLS will do this every year, or when it gets to the final two teams in the league, every single other team is wishing those two teams best. And Montreal Impact will sometimes do a little wink, wink. Well, we have to do it and we'll do it, but we're wishing Toronto FC all the best in the final. So yeah, you're going to have those rivalries on the league, but at the same time, you guys are all still part of the same family. And I think supporting, the successes of your other team are sometimes important, and add a little class, hopefully, to what you guys are doing. So again, other League One Ontario teams, and also, your national team. So so from your local level, your grassroots level, what the local kids are doing, all the way up to the national team, international level. I think it's important that you guys are also including that into your storyboard, in terms of sharing those stories. And I guess, being good soccer citizens when it comes to that. I wanted to, again, I know I've rambled a bit on, and again, hopefully you guys, caught at least, 52% of that, as Ollie would suggest. But I think that if there's a couple things that, to kind of pull back on what you want to kind of keep in mind is one, make sure you guys are celebrating your stories, celebrate your success, and again, reinforce that brand. When it comes to just, your priorities, be in line with that, and teamwork is so important. Teamwork within your own organization, teamwork within, your community and your league, and again, just kind of working across the different corners.
All righty. Richard, the amount of work you put into that, to deep dive into people's social accounts, to give real practical examples. Thank you for doing that. It made things even more really contextual and understandable for our community, for us. So thank you for the time you put in. The information was so rich and full of great ideas. We're going to continue to build off of this and really work with people on how to create this wonderful content. So I'm going to ask you the question we have here, and now that it's the question period, I'll ask you the one we have, and I'll continue after that with my comments. So what role does Canada Soccer play in connecting national team players with their grassroots clubs? I can speak to this as well, having been a national team player and doing this, but is this just dependent on the coach maintaining contact with the player themselves, and inviting them back to be a guest speaker, or does Canada Soccer engage or push national team players to give back? So maybe you can start, Richard, and then I can add.
Yeah, and you could probably give some good examples too. And I think obviously every athlete is a little different too in terms of where they move on. We of course, work with our national team players, and at the same time, it's very important that they're also professional players. And, obviously, so within their own professional team settings, they might already have some different programs that they're doing, which is fantastic. And then we'll also have some different programs. So a lot of times, we'll also get asked in terms of, hey, how do we get a hold of player X, Y, Z? And a lot of the times, the players, of course, are with their clubs in those moments. But then we also, have had a program placed with Don Martin on our marketing side to make sure that, one, we're keeping some of our existing players engaged in some of those opportunities, as well as, a lot of times with our alumni too. So Carmen, you may want to chat a little bit some of the experiences you've had.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So as a player, we would always go through the federation. So there was the person now, her name is Stephanie Matthews. She manages these particular appearances. And, for the players, for us, it was always, we knew we had a responsibility to give back, and a lot of us, almost all, did. There is a fee associated with it based on our time, and like Richard said, we're not home a lot, especially this new generation is offshore, and they're playing overseas, so they're actually not physically here, and there's no centralized venue, so their time is really scarce. I guess it was safe to say, Richard, that's part of the issue as well. Everyone's off playing pro, but a lot of the times, if you have a relationship, you've seen Jade Revere give back to the Pickering Club because she had some roots there. But everything goes through Canada Soccer to make sure the players are protected, and the messaging is consistent. But to answer the question, Matt, definitely, it's part of our job as ambassadors of the sport to give back. And even last thing I'll say, even when I was a technical director, albeit short, at Kleinberg Nobleton Soccer Club, I requested one of my best friends, Janelle Foligno, officially through Stephanie Matthews to make sure that she was compensated for her time and her image and her likeness. So that's hopefully helpful. Is that good, Richard?
Yeah, and I think the other thing I can say too is don't lose fact that you guys have some local idols in your organizations too, and as you start to make those connect points with your community. I mean, I grew up in Vancouver, and I followed the Whitecaps, I followed the Canucks, and I followed the AAA, Vancouver Canadians. And I'm sure nobody here knows who Mike Felder was, but those guys, at all different levels, were all heroes. So I grew up. Carl Valentine was the man. Richard Brodeur was the man, and there were some baseball guys too. Whether it was a Sam Horn or Mike Felder that nobody's just heard of since, but as a 10-year-old kid, were important figures when I was growing up.
Really good. Awesome stuff. Another question from Victoria. She works with us at CPL as well. And she has a few questions. I think she'd want to connect with you online about this, so we won't dive into all of them. They're great questions. She says, how do you measure the success of a media relation campaign? We'll start there.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it depends on what you're looking to get out of it. And I think, also does it align with the priorities? Because sometimes there's things that, first off too, is I prefer the term digital media. Social media becomes when you start sharing and actually engaging. So there are some things that, we're just posting and, I just call it that's our digital media channel. But then other times when we come back and engage. We obviously with Canada Soccer, it's we've got a sizable account and we've had some, it's actually gave us some great insight when it comes to what does or what doesn't work, for instance, on game days. When it gave us some great insight in terms of what we should and shouldn't be putting our emphasis on. As an example, on a match day, there's typically at least there's 5 standard graphics that we'll put into every single match day that we know will do well. And so even if, outside of any special things that might be happening in the game, we're going to have a match day graphic. We know that we're going to have, some sort of a halftime update, a full-time update, as well as any goals that are happening, and as well as the starting 11. We know those are our 5 staples. So so when it comes to individual games, we do have metrics, even outside the stuff that you can buy. If you're in Twitter, you can actually see some of those numbers. When it comes to Instagram, you can see some of and kind of gauge, kind of what does and what doesn't work, and then make those adjustments as you kind of continue with your coverage. And again, there's other things that, we know that might not get the same numbers, the big numbers, but there's a more important piece that we're putting there together in terms of whether it's it could be a board update, it could be a, just congratulating X, Y, Z, so it's not always about the numbers. Sometimes it's what's important is always come back to our priorities, our vision, and what's important to our brand sometimes too.
Brilliant. That's great. Really appreciate that insight. And the last question we have for you is, what are your thoughts on leveraging influencers around, like you said, it's just digital until you engage socially. So what's the importance of aligning with different accounts? She mentioned Six Buzz, which is, I know, pretty controversial, but I'm just in general, what are your thoughts on that?
I think I've always kind of, I know that terms come across and everything like that. But for me, I think the more important thing is just forget the terms. It's got to be authentic. And I think a lot of times people might, try to chase for, hey, wouldn't it be great if XYZ said something about us. But it's got to be authentic. Sometimes, yeah, we put together programs, something special, ahead of the Women's World Cup. We made sure that, a couple hundred people got a game jersey, a Canadian national team game jersey with their name on the back of it before we hosted an event like that. And yeah, that provided some great, whether it was Georges St. Pierre or whether it was, Sarah McLaughlin wearing that jersey and then sharing it on their channels, provided some great exposure for the competition ahead of, and for the national team ahead of the competition. But, again, I think that whatever you're doing is just make sure, I think it's authentic.
Oh, really, really love that answer. It resonates quite a bit, especially with the people in this league and the community we've built. So we're going to be respectful of your time, Richard. You've given us a full hour, so thank you so much. I will wrap it up now. Just to highlight a couple things you've said as we wrap up. We want you to know that my team, Marty, Victoria, whoever is helping us right now, specifically Marty, will be uploading some pictures throughout the next few weeks, starting with 2019. So you have access to all your assets in terms of photos. MSA accounts from the past, the men's division can go back and access those. The women's division will have those in the future, which is really exciting for this league as we progress forward in the women's game. YouTube, First Touch Football, they've all been great in terms of content. So leveraging what was then done in the past, that's free. And a little tip that I've learned, I have a little fun, interesting graphic design. I'm not great, but I'm decent. Canva.com is a free graphic design template resource. Canva, canva.com. And I'll share these when I upload this presentation later. But other than that, I would call this a masterclass, Richard. It was, my brain was going nuts. I'm not even with a club, but I was thinking of all the ways we could use your information to make ourselves, to elevate ourselves in our delivery publicly and internally. So on that, thank you. Have a fantastic day. Stay safe.
Yeah, and thank you, Carmen. And again, 100% happy to chat with anybody. Happy to keep the conversation going because at the end of the day, I think, like some of you on the call, just passionate about the sport, but also passionate about creating stuff and writing and creating great content. So anytime that we can kind of bounce ideas off each other, happy to get on a call.
You're awesome. I'll include your contact information, your social, or your work email. I will do that.
Yes.
So people know where to reach you. So on that note, everybody, thank you. Have a great day. And we will see you guys next week at 2 p.m. on Wednesday for our next, for Roy Nasrallah from CPL. Talk to you soon.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.